My name is Shelley Bauchi, 34 years old. New Year's Eve always used to feel like a held breath in our house. Popcorn bowls brimming, the TV countdown bouncing at the bottom of the screen, my own kids in flannel pajamas pretending not to be waiting for the fireworks. Tonight, I wanted that breath to belong to us, to my little family, to a quiet promise I'd whispered to myself in early December. No more being the default babysitter. For 5 years, I've been the family assumption in human form. If mom had dinner plans, we're bringing the kids. If my older sister had a quick errand, it could mean an entire weekend. No heads up, no, is this okay? Just the soft threat of disappointment if I even considered saying no. I told myself I didn't mind because I love my niece and nephew. But love without boundaries becomes something else. It becomes a funnel. Your time, your energy, your money, all poured into an open mouth that never says thank you. So when my phone lit up that afternoon, "You'll take them overnight. We have plans." I stared at the message until the words stopped meaning anything. It wasn't a question. It was the weather. It was a fact. The doorbell of my life ringing itself. I didn't reply. Instead, I took a pen and a piece of cardstock from the craft drawer. My hands were steady in a way they hadn't been in years. I wrote, "We are not available tonight. Do not leave the children. Shelley." I taped it to the front door so the tape made a crisp, decisive sound. Behind me, Noah, my boyfriend, watched in that quiet way of his, leaning one shoulder against the hallway wall. "You sure?" he asked softly. "Yes." He didn't say I was being dramatic. He didn't remind me of the fallout. He just nodded, went to the kitchen, and returned with hot cocoa packets like a man choosing sides without a speech. By 7, the house smelled like cinnamon and microwave butter. My kids were arguing over which animated movie was most New Year's appropriate. When the driveway lights flashed across the living room, my stomach didn't drop. It just held. The car doors opened. Backpacks tumbled out first. Then 2 small figures in thin hoodies, my niece with a glittery party hat already bent at the tip. On the porch, they hesitated. My mother and sister waved from the glossy darkness of the car like chauffeurs dismissing their passengers. They expected the door to open itself. It didn't. They walked the kids up at last. I watched from the hallway, unseen, the way you watch the last seconds of a familiar dream. My sister glanced at the note. Her face did something sharp. The knocking started. Mom first, then my sister, each pound like an accusation that I'd broken a law we never wrote down. I didn't move. My son tugged my sleeve. "Is something wrong?" "No," I told him. "We're just not opening the door tonight." The knocking escalated to shouting, to the use of my full name like a weapon. Then the calls began. I let the phone ring. After the third call, text came rapid fire. "Are you serious?" "Shelley, open up. You're being ridiculous." I set the phone face down. Noah sat between our 2 kids with the remote and said, "Ready?" When they chorused "ready," he hit play. The movie's first bright notes swallowed the muffled voices outside. And then, after a while, the house went very quiet. I crossed to the window and lifted the corner of the curtain. On the porch, my niece was rereading the note while my nephew blinked up at the peephole as if he could will my eye to appear there. Down on the driveway, Mom's phone lit her face an unflattering blue. My sister's mouth was a hard line. 10 minutes later, I watched my sister's expression change from anger to something like fear. A new light from her phone. She showed Mom. The blue glow bounced between their faces, and then both their heads snapped toward the house, toward the unseen me. I knew exactly what they were looking at. The joint account, the one I opened years ago when we all promised to contribute for the kids. I had been the only one actually contributing. Thousands over the years, while they told me how generous we all were. What they didn't understand was that legally, the account was mine. I had opened it in my name because someone had to. On December 30th, I transferred every dollar out. When they saw the balance, dollar, I felt the shock travel from their screens to the porch planks. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel free either. I felt correct, like a picture finally straight on the wall. The knocking stopped. The shouting stopped. My phone buzzed and then went still. For a long minute, no one moved. Then, in a moment I will always replay with a mixture of fury and disbelief, my mother and sister turned, walked down the steps, got into the car, and drove away. They left 2 children on my porch at 7:43 p.m. in late December, with breath fogging the porch light and party hats making silhouettes on the frosted glass. My daughter's voice small. "Mom?" I opened the door. The cold slapped the hallway. I stretched my arms out to the kids without a speech, without even a question, and they came in all at once, the way birds do when a storm breaks. I closed and locked the door, turned the deadbolt with a finality that clicked through my chest. We didn't talk about the porch. I told them to take off their shoes, pressed warm mugs into their hands, and restarted the movie like this was the plan all along. My niece sat close to my daughter, that crushed party hat now a flimsy crown she didn't bother to remove. My nephew tucked his knees to his chest and laughed too loud at the first joke, like laughter might be the ticket price for staying. Noah brought blankets and spread them with a flourish. I watched his hands, the quiet competence of them, the way they told my whole nervous system, "We have this." Midnight came. We toasted with sparkling cider, 4 kids and 2 adults, and a new, fragile silence. Not peaceful, just thinner, like tissue paper stretched over something heavy. No call from Mom, no text from my sister. At 1:47 a.m., my phone rang with an unknown number. I almost let it go to voicemail, then answered in a whisper. "Hello?" A child's whisper back. "Aunt Shelley?" My stomach dropped into my knees. It was my younger nephew, the one who wasn't on my couch. His voice shook. I could hear air moving around him like a draft. "Where are you?" I asked. "At home," he said. "We were told to wait." "The house. My sister's house. The one with the broken weather strip I'd offered to fix." I closed my eyes and could see the front door hanging open in my mind, the way it sometimes refused to latch unless you lifted it just so. "Unlock the door if you can," I told him, already pulling on my boots. "I'm coming." Noah didn't ask where. He only said, "Be careful," and placed his hand for 1 second at the small of my back like a benediction. My kids were asleep. My niece's party hat had slid to the floor and lay there like a small, defeated thing. The drive carved a tunnel through the dark. Streetlights gave way to the kind of neighborhood where porch bulbs burn out and stay out. I knew before I hit the curb that the front door would be ajar. It was. The house was black, cold, and still. Inside, my nephews were curled like commas on a couch that shouldn't have been this cold. A dead phone rested between them like an apology. No food, no water. A note on the fridge. The familiar handwriting slanted and brisk. "Don't touch anything." I took them home wrapped in the thickest blankets I had in the trunk, the kind I bring to soccer sidelines in January. In the rearview mirror, I saw 2 small faces relax in stages, like someone was loosening a tourniquet. Back at my house, I tucked them beside their cousins, 4 sleeping children forming a messy snowdrift of limbs and quilts. I stood at the window and stared out at the dark street, the porch light making a bright circle on the steps. An island. The taped note still fluttered slightly when the heater kicked on. My phone buzzed at noon the next day with 1 text from my mother. "You betrayed us." Not, "Are they safe?" Not, "Thank you." Not even, "Why did you take them?" Noah read it over my shoulder, and I felt, more than saw, the way his jaw set. Not hard, not angry, just decided. "Then they don't know what betrayal is," he said quietly. The house got very quiet again, the kind of quiet that makes you count heartbeats. I'd thought all these years that I was being helpful, useful, the good daughter, the dependable sister, but sometimes being good is just being convenient. And convenience was over. Outside, the note held its place on the door like a line drawn across a map of my life, the first true boundary I'd made. I didn't know yet that a car was already crossing state lines, that a father I barely knew would arrive like an answer to a question I hadn't allowed myself to ask. I only knew this: the kids were safe, and how little that mattered to the 2 people who should have cared the most. The morning light came thin and colorless, the kind that makes everything look softer than it is. The house was still, 4 children sleeping across the living room floor, tangled in blankets, the empty cocoa mugs from last night lined up like witnesses. I stood at the kitchen window, fingers tight around my coffee mug, watching frost melt off the porch railing. Noah came up behind me, sliding an arm around my waist. "They didn't call?" he asked. I shook my head. Not once. It had been nearly 12 hours since my mother's text. "You betrayed us." No concern, no question. Just blame. "Maybe they'll show up this morning," Noah said carefully, though he didn't sound convinced. "If they do," I said, "they can talk to me through the door." He nodded once, his quiet agreement grounding me more than any pep talk could. Around 9, the kids started stirring. My niece rubbed her eyes and asked if her mom was coming. I opened my mouth, then closed it again. I didn't have an answer that wouldn't hurt. Instead, I said, "We're having pancakes today. You like chocolate chips?" Her little nod broke something in me. By late morning, the living room looked almost normal. Cartoons on the TV, syrup drips on the table. I wanted to freeze that picture, just kids being kids, before the next wave of chaos inevitably hit. But it didn't. Noon passed, then 1, then 2, still nothing. Finally, at 2:13 p.m., my phone vibrated. Mom again. Just 3 words this time. "You'll regret this." I stared at it so long Noah finally took the phone from my hand, turned it over, and placed it face down on the counter. "Don't let them rewrite this," he said. "They already are," I murmured. Because that's what my family did best. Twist guilt into a mirror until you couldn't tell right from wrong anymore. By 5, the sun had dropped low enough to stain the curtains gold. I turned on the porch light out of habit and glanced at the old security app on my phone, the one connected to the camera I'd installed months ago outside my sister's house. She never knew about it. I'd set it up to check on the kids when she'd disappear for hours. The motion alert had gone off earlier that afternoon. I opened the feed. There she was, my mother. She stood in front of my sister's house for barely 2 minutes. The front door hung half open, just like I'd found it the night before. She didn't go in, didn't even call out for the children. She just looked around, frowned, and left. Didn't close the door behind her. I pressed my palm over my mouth. I don't know if it was shock or something colder, realization maybe, that they had truly decided to punish me by abandoning them. It was after 7 when Noah said, "You should eat." I shook my head, not hungry. But I did sit down, mostly because he kept looking at me like I might fall apart if I stayed standing. The kids were playing a board game on the carpet. The laughter sounded normal again, almost bright. My niece leaned close to my daughter and whispered something that made both of them giggle. I caught just a fragment of it. "I like it better here." That's when my throat tightened. No child should have to compare homes like that. At 7:38 p.m., my phone rang again. Unknown number. For a second, I thought it was a spam call. Then I answered. "Hello?" A man's voice, rough, exhausted, but steady. "Shelley, this is Marcus." The name hit a faint bell in my mind. "I'm sorry." "Marcus Caldwell, He hesitated, voice catching. "I'm their father." I went still. I heard what happened," he said quickly. "Are they safe? Are they with you?" My heart started pounding. "Yes, they're safe. They're here." He exhaled like someone who hadn't breathed in months. "I was told..." He trailed off, voice shaking slightly. "I was told they were fine, that I didn't need to call anymore, that they didn't want to talk to me." I could hear the edge of the road through the phone, wind, engine hum, long highway miles. "Where are you?" I asked. "About halfway across Illinois. I've been driving since this morning. I'll be there before midnight." "You're driving here?" "Yes. I need to see them, Shelley. Please don't send them back before I arrive." I closed my eyes. "I won't." Noah, who had been listening from across the table, mouthed, "Who is it?" I whispered. "Their dad." He gave a short, firm nod. "Good. Let him come." After I hung up, I sat for a long time at the kitchen table. I remembered the things my sister had said about him. Deadbeat, selfish, unreliable. But the man I'd just spoken to didn't sound like any of those things. He sounded like someone racing the clock to get to his children before the world collapsed again. Around 9:15, my phone buzzed with a text from him. "Crossed the state line. About 90 minutes out." I typed back, "They're here. They're okay." When I looked up, Noah was watching me. "What's wrong?" he asked. I said slowly, "everything I believed about my sister's marriage might be a lie." He nodded, thoughtful. "Then maybe it's time for the truth to show up." I went to check on the kids. They were half asleep, sprawled in their pillow fort, a cartoon humming softly in the background. My niece had one arm around my daughter. My nephew's hand was resting protectively on his brother's shoulder. Outside, the night pressed against the windows. It was the kind of dark that doesn't feel empty. It feels waiting. At 11:03 p.m., headlights rolled up the driveway. I peeked through the curtain. A man stepped out. Tall, worn from travel, his coat creased, his face drawn. He left the car door open and just stood there for a moment, staring at the house like it might vanish. Then the front door opened before I could reach it. 2 small figures bolted past me barefoot, sprinting into the yard. "Dad!" He dropped to his knees, arms open, and they crashed into him. The sound that came out of him, that choked, gutted sob, wasn't the sound of a reunion. It was the sound of survival. I stood frozen at the door. Even Noah went still behind me, one hand gripping the frame. The three of them clung together under the porch light, while frost glittered in their hair. I don't think any of them noticed the cold. When he finally looked up at me, his eyes were rimmed red, but clear. "Thank you," he said. It was barely a whisper. "Come inside," I told him. "They've had cocoa. You should too." Inside, while the kids got warm, he sat at the kitchen table with Noah and me. His hands trembled slightly as he unzipped his backpack and pulled out a worn folder. "You should see this," he said. Inside were envelopes, dozens of them. Letters, birthday cards, drawings in childish crayon, each one addressed to his kids. Every single one stamped "Return to Sender." Some had my sister's handwriting on them. In her sharp, slanted script, "Do not give her this." I felt sick. Marcus laid out screenshots next. Bank transfers, small amounts, steady over months. Not court-ordered support, just extra money he sent for clothes, groceries, school trips, all transferred to my mother or my sister. No receipts, no thank yous. "She told me they were struggling," he said, voice cracking, "that I should help more. I did, but the kids never saw a cent." He rubbed his forehead. I was still trying to believe they'd work it out. I didn't want another fight. Then he slid one more paper across the table, an official-looking document with a notary seal. A petition for emergency custody, signed 4 days before New Year's Eve. "I hadn't filed it," he said. "Not until this morning." I stared at him. "Why not?" "Because I wanted to believe they'd keep the kids safe." My stomach turned. "And now?" "Now," he said quietly. "I know better." He reached for his coffee, then paused. "A neighbor sent me something last night, a photo from my sister's social media." He handed me his phone. The image glowed in the dim kitchen light. A group of people at a bar, champagne flutes raised, my sister front and center. The caption read, "No kids, no drama, finally free for the night." The timestamp, 8:02 p.m. New Year's Eve, the exact hour she'd left her kids on my porch. My hands went cold. Noah leaned over my shoulder, reading the caption out loud. His voice was low, dangerous. "Finally free. Unbelievable." Marcus nodded, jaw tight. "She wanted a night off. I'm making sure she gets one, permanently." He folded his hands together, looked straight at me. "Tomorrow morning, I'm filing the custody order. I'll need your statement and the footage from your camera." "You'll have it," I said without hesitation. In that moment, I knew there was no going back. Whatever family had meant before, it was over. The next day would decide everything. When I woke the next morning, sunlight was spilling through the kitchen blinds like nothing had happened. But everything had. The smell of pancakes lingered from breakfast. The kids laughing upstairs with Noah while I sat at the kitchen table with Marcus. His eyes were rimmed with exhaustion, but he looked steadier now. Purpose can do that. Turn wreckage into direction. He'd already called his lawyer. CPS was opening an investigation. By noon, the custody hearing would be filed under emergency protection. I watched him across the table as he gathered the documents back into his folder. The letters, the screenshots, the affidavit. My stomach twisted, thinking how long he'd been saving proof instead of seeing his kids. "How did you even find out?" I asked. He gave a short, humorless laugh. "An old neighbor, someone who follows my sister on social media. She saw the New Year's Eve post, knew the kids were supposed to be with her, and called me." I remembered the caption again. "No kids, no drama. Finally free for the night." And suddenly I felt heat rise behind my eyes. Not tears, rage. Noah appeared in the doorway, balancing 2 mugs of coffee. "She posted that?" he asked when Marcus nodded. "Then she deserves everything that's coming." Marcus looked down. "I don't want revenge. I just want my kids safe." His voice cracked on the last word, and that's what did it. Made me realize how deeply my sister's lies had stolen not just his children, but years of their lives together. "Do you think she'll fight it?" I asked. He sighed. "Oh, she'll fight. Your mother will too. But the facts don't lie, Shelley. Not anymore." By mid-afternoon, my phone buzzed with messages I didn't want to open. Mom, sister, even a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years. "What did you do? You'll ruin her life. You're overreacting again." Each one chipped at the edge of my calm. Noah caught me scrolling and gently took the phone from my hand. "Don't. They're baiting you." I nodded, but felt the tremor in my jaw. "They act like I kidnapped those kids." He brushed my shoulder. "Because admitting the truth would mean admitting what kind of mother your sister really is." I took a shaky breath. I think I've spent my whole life cleaning up her messes. Then this time, he said quietly, let her live in it. At 4 p.m., there was a knock at the door, the kind that makes your heart skip once. Noah stood first, but I shook my head. I've got it. When I opened the door, my sister stood there, wind-tangled hair and fury in her eyes. Behind her, my mother, clutching her purse like a shield. Where are my kids? My sister demanded. Safe, I said evenly, unlike when you left them alone all night. She tried to shove the door wider, but Noah's hand came down on the top edge, steady as a wall. Back up, he said quietly. You don't get to tell me what to do in my family's business, she snapped. He didn't flinch. You made it everyone's business when you abandoned 2 children. Mom's voice cut in, shrill and righteous. Shelley, enough of this nonsense. You don't understand what it's like raising kids on your own. Sometimes mistakes happen. I stared at her. Leaving them on a porch in 30-degree weather is not a mistake. It's neglect. Her lips trembled with anger. You've always been dramatic, always looking for reasons to play the victim. I almost laughed, but it came out flat. You raised me to think endurance was loyalty. It's not. My sister's voice cracked through the argument like glass. I want my kids, Shelley, right now. They're not yours to claim anymore, I said softly. Confusion flickered across her face, the first break in her fury. What are you talking about? As if on cue, the sound of tires on gravel, a dark sedan pulled up. Marcus stepped out, papers in hand, flanked by a woman in a gray coat, CPS. Mom's eyes widened. What is this? Marcus's voice was calm but unshakable. This is an emergency custody order signed by the court this morning. He handed it to the CPS worker, who turned to my sister. Ma'am, you're required to remain outside until we complete our verification. My sister's face went white, then red. You can't take them from me. The CPS agent didn't blink. They were already taken, from your porch, by someone who did what you should have. I felt Noah's hand slide into mine behind the doorframe, anchoring me. My mother started shouting over everyone. This is betrayal, Shelley. Family sticks together. I turned to her. Family doesn't leave children to freeze. She blinked, stunned for half a second, as if she hadn't expected me to fight back. Then came the rage. You ungrateful... Noah stepped between us. Enough. For a moment, nobody moved. Wind stirred the porch plants. The kids, upstairs, laughed at something on the TV, unaware their whole world was being rearranged. Finally, Marcus spoke again. I'm taking them home, to a real home. He looked at me then, not with triumph, but with gratitude so raw I had to look away. I'll make sure they know who stood up for them, he said quietly. By nightfall, the CPS worker had left. My sister and mother had driven off, still hurling threats that sounded more desperate than dangerous. Inside, the house was warm again. Noah reheated dinner. The kids were sprawled on the couch with blankets up to their chins. Marcus was in the guest room, filling out forms on his laptop, the glow from the screen lighting the tired lines of his face. I stood in the doorway. You'll stay until the court finalizes it? He nodded. 2, maybe 3 days. Then we'll go home. Do you think she'll try to stop you? He gave a faint smile. She already did, and failed. He hesitated, looking up at me. You know, I think she learned this from someone. What do you mean? The way she uses guilt, how she punishes love when it doesn't obey. The words hit me harder than I expected, because I did know who he meant. My mother. For years, she'd treated guilt like currency, and I'd been her most reliable bank. I swallowed hard. I think you're right. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat on the couch with Noah. The house felt still, but not empty. He rested his hand over mine. Are you okay? I don't know yet, I admitted. I feel like my entire family just evaporated. He tilted his head. Or maybe you finally stopped pretending it was family at all. I let out a slow breath. Maybe. Outside, frost was gathering again on the window panes. The note I'd taped to the door was still there, edges curling, letters fading slightly. But it had done its job. It had drawn a line that could no longer be erased. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for drawing it. Tomorrow would bring hearings, signatures, papers, maybe even chaos. But tonight, the house was quiet, full of warmth and the sound of safe breathing. That was enough. The next morning began with the sound of my phone vibrating against the nightstand. 5 missed calls, 3 new voicemails, all from my mother. I didn't even need to listen to know the tone, anger disguised as heartbreak. She'd perfected that voice years ago, half sob, half accusation. Noah stirred beside me. You're not going to call back, are you? I shook my head, pulling the blanket tighter around my shoulders. Not today. Because today wasn't about guilt. Today was about protection. Downstairs, Marcus was already dressed, his shirt neatly pressed despite the circles under his eyes. The kids were eating cereal at the table, cartoons flickering quietly in the background. When I walked in, my niece smiled at me, small but real. That smile told me everything I needed to know. "Big day?" I asked Marcus as he poured coffee. "Yeah," he said. "Court hearing at 9. CPS will escort us. After that, the custody order becomes permanent." He hesitated, glancing toward the window. "They might show up again. Your mom, your sister." "They won't get in," I said simply. He nodded, eyes soft with gratitude. "You've done more for them in one weekend than anyone has in years." At exactly 8:42 a.m., the sound of tires crunching on the driveway. I didn't even have to look. I knew that car. My mother's beige sedan. Behind it, my sister's silver SUV. Noah met my eyes across the kitchen. "I'll get the door," he said. I shook my head. "No, I need to do this." By the time I stepped onto the porch, they were halfway up the path. Mom's lips were pressed so tight they'd gone pale. My sister's eyes were red-rimmed and furious. "Where are they?" she demanded. "Where are my children, Shelley?" I didn't raise my voice. "Inside, safe, with their father." She blinked as if she couldn't quite process the words. "You can't do this. They're mine." "No," I said softly. "They're not your property. They're people you abandoned." Her face twisted. "You think you're better than me now? You always needed to play savior." Mom jumped in, the way she always did, siding with whoever shouted loudest. "Shelley, stop this madness. You're tearing the family apart." "The family was already apart," I said. "You just didn't notice until someone stopped pretending it wasn't." For a second, the wind carried nothing but our breathing. Then, behind me, the front door opened. Marcus stepped out, flanked by a uniformed officer and a CPS representative holding a clipboard. The papers in her hand gleamed under the morning light. My sister froze. "What is that?" Marcus's voice was calm. "A court-issued custody transfer, signed at 8 o'clock this morning." He handed it to the officer, who unfolded it with methodical precision. "As of this ruling, legal custody of minors Hannah and Levi Caldwell is awarded to their father, Marcus Caldwell. All visitation requests must go through family court." Mom's face drained of color. "You can't just take them like this," she whispered. The officer didn't respond. He simply turned toward her. "Ma'am, please step back." My sister lunged forward, shouting, "You won't get away with this! I'll fight you!" Marcus stood his ground. "You already did, and you lost." The CPS worker took a step forward, her voice firm, but not unkind. "Ma'am, we've reviewed the reports. The unattended minors, the prior school concerns, the welfare checks. This is not a misunderstanding." My sister's eyes darted to me, desperate, furious. "You did this, Shelley. You ruined my life." I felt Noah's hand touch the small of my back, steadying me. "No," I said quietly. "You did that yourself. I just stopped covering for you." That was when she snapped. She shoved past the officer, trying to push the door open. Noah moved instantly, blocking her. "Enough," he said in that low, steady tone that could silence a storm. The officer grabbed her arm. "Ma'am, step back now." She jerked free, screaming, "They're my kids!" But the door was already closed. The officer signaled to his partner, who stepped between her and the porch. Within moments, the situation dissolved into orders and warnings. My mother tried to intervene, pleading, crying, but her words sounded hollow, even to herself. When the police car finally pulled away, with my sister inside, a temporary restraining order already in motion, the silence that followed felt unreal. Inside, the kids were sitting on the couch, hugging their knees, eyes wide. Marcus knelt down in front of them. "It's okay," he said gently. "You're coming home with me. For good this time." My niece blinked. "Really?" He smiled, voice breaking. "Really?" I stood by the stairs, one hand pressed to the wall for balance. Noah's arm found its way around my shoulders. When the officer handed Marcus the final copy of the court order, I felt something loosen inside me, a weight I hadn't realized I'd been carrying for years. This was it, the end of pretending. That evening, after everything quieted down, Marcus asked if he could make dinner. He cooked simple pasta, nothing fancy, but the kids ate like it was a feast. Laughter returned, slow and shy at first, then bright and full. Afterward, he sat at the kitchen table, going through a stack of drawings and unopened letters, the ones his children had never seen. I leaned against the counter, watching him trace their crayon lines with his fingertips. He looked up at me. "I think I owe you more than I can ever repay." "You don't owe me anything," I said. "You just needed the truth." He nodded slowly. "And you gave it to me." The kids were curled up in the living room. whispering to each other about their new house, their new rooms, their new life. Every few minutes, one of them would peek into the kitchen just to make sure their dad was still there. And every time he'd smile back. He wasn't going anywhere. When the house finally went quiet, I stepped onto the porch. The night air bit at my skin, but it felt clean, honest. The old note was still there on the door, edges yellowing, tape curling. Noah came out behind me, slipping his hand into mine. "You did it," he said. I shook my head. "No, we did it. I just stopped being afraid of what they'd say." He smiled faintly. "That's the hardest part." Out on the street, taillights disappeared into the distance. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I needed to look back. Inside, warmth and laughter and safety waited. And in that small, ordinary miracle of a quiet house, I realized something. I hadn't just saved 2 kids. I'd saved the part of myself that finally believed she was allowed to say no. 3 days later, the snow began to melt. It wasn't much, just a thin film of frost slipping off the railing. But it felt symbolic. The storm had finally passed. Marcus had spent the morning packing his car, boxes of clothes, a few toys, a stack of drawings the kids insisted on keeping. My living room looked half empty without their laughter bouncing off the walls. I stood by the doorway watching as he checked the straps on the roof rack for the 3rd time. He looked lighter, stronger, the way people do when purpose replaces fear. Inside, the kids were finishing their pancakes. My niece had painted her nails with my daughter the night before. Glittery pink, slightly uneven, but perfect in the way only a child's joy can be. My nephew sat beside her, chatting excitedly about the new school he'd be attending, already imagining the friends he'd make. For the first time since they arrived on my porch, they looked like kids, not survivors. Marcus came back inside, snowflakes caught in his hair. "We're ready." I swallowed hard. "Already?" He nodded. "Court finalized everything this morning. We have a hearing for full custody in 6 months, but the emergency order stands until then. My lawyer says it's basically permanent." "That's good," I said, though the word felt too small for what it meant. He smiled faintly. "You sure you're okay with all this?" I laughed softly. "I think I've been waiting my whole life to see a happy ending that doesn't belong to someone else." Noah came in from this kitchen carrying 2 travel mugs of cocoa. "Fuel for the road," he said, "and for your nerves." Marcus accepted them with a grin. "You two have been something else." "We just did what family should do," Noah replied. Marcus looked down, voice catching. "Funny. I had to lose most of mine to find that kind of family again." When the kids came to say goodbye, I knelt to their level. My niece's eyes were shiny, but brave. "Can we visit sometime?" she asked. "Anytime," I promised. "But next time you come because you want to, not because you have to." She nodded, serious as a grown-up. My nephew threw his arms around my neck and whispered, "Thank you for not letting us freeze." Those words carved straight through me. I hugged him tighter. "You never deserved that, sweetheart. None of it." Noah stood behind me, his hand steady on my shoulder as Marcus ushered the kids to the car. They waved through the window as they pulled out of the driveway, faces pressed to the glass, smiles trembling but real. The car disappeared around the corner, leaving tire tracks in slush and silence behind it. Inside, the house felt too still, too quiet. The toys stacked neatly in a bin, the folded blankets on the couch, the faint smell of syrup and crayons. I stood there, arms crossed, until Noah came up behind me. "You okay?" I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. "It's strange. I feel both lighter and sadder at the same time." "That's what freedom feels like," he said. "It's heavy before it's light." We sat on the couch, just listening to the hum of the heater. Outside, wind brushed against the window, but it wasn't the same kind of cold as before. It was cleaner, distant, like it had finally been invited to stay outside. That evening, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. It was Marcus. "Made it home. Kids are safe. We just finished dinner. They're asleep already. Thank you again for everything. They said they miss you." I smiled, typing back, "Tell them I miss them too, and that they're finally where they belong." Then I set the phone down, unplugged the charger, and let it go dark. 2 days later, an envelope arrived in the mail. No return address. Inside was a small card, written in my sister's handwriting. The words were few, the ink smudged in places. "You got what you wanted." That was it. No apology, no explanation, just bitterness pretending to be closure. I placed it in a drawer, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I wanted proof. Proof that sometimes people refuse to change, even when they've been handed every chance to. I wasn't angry, not anymore, just done. A week later, life found its rhythm again. Mornings with coffee, school drop-offs, weekend errands. Noah fixing the leaky faucet in the bathroom while I made lists on the fridge. But there were moments, small, quiet ones, when I'd glance at the porch and see the ghost of that night. 2 kids standing in the cold, backpacks slipping off their shoulders, waiting for a door that had always opened for everyone else. That was the night I stopped being everyone's emergency plan and started being my own protector. Sometimes I still think about the word betrayal, the one my mother texted me like it was a curse. I used to believe betrayal was when someone turned on you. Now I understand. Sometimes betrayal is just choosing yourself when others expected your silence. That Saturday, I tore the old note off the front door. The paper was yellowed, the ink faded, but the words still made my chest tighten. "We are not available tonight. Do not leave the children. Shelley." I folded it once, then slid it into the back of a drawer. A relic, a reminder of the moment I decided I was done being used. Noah leaned against the doorframe watching me. "You finally ready to take that down?" "Yeah," I said, smiling faintly. "It's done its job." He nodded, then reached for my hand. "So what now?" "Now?" I looked at him, at the warmth in his eyes. "Now I build something new. Something that doesn't depend on anyone's permission." He squeezed my hand. "Sounds like a good start." I looked out at the empty street, at the thin trail of frost still melting on the edge of the porch. For once, it didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the first breath after surfacing from too deep underwater. Because sometimes peace doesn't come with forgiveness or apologies. Sometimes it comes with a locked door, a quiet house, and the certainty that you will never again be anyone's afterthought. And for me, that was enough.